Hi, everyone. If you could, just while we're waiting, just maybe put your name and your location in Tennessee in the chat box, that would be great. All right. I think we'll get started now. I'm sure some people will be joining as we get started, but in the interest of time, I think we'll move forward. Everything that this presentation, this training will be, it's being recorded, and so you'll be able to. We'll be sending out the link after, so you'll be able to go back and hear things. And you may have some colleagues or friends who wanted to attend but couldn't, so then the recording will be helpful. So this is the first of 2 workshops that we're going to do this week on community data interpretation as part of the upcoming summits in Tennessee. This first one is about what is community data interpretation. So there are a few things that we want to accomplish today. Advance the slides. But first, I just want to introduce our team. So we have, I don't know if all of you are on the phone, if you could all just briefly introduce yourselves, our team. Jen?
Sure. Hi, Jason. I'm Jen Loeffler-Cobia, and I'm a senior researcher here at AIR. Been with AIR for about 3 years and have been working in the substance abuse criminal justice field for the last 20 years.
Thanks, Jen. Sanjay? Sanjay, Sarah? Some people are going to be trickling in. Yeah, hi, Sarah.
Yep. Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm a data scientist here at AIR, and I've been doing some work in the opioids and addiction space for the past year and working with data and visualizations for a lot longer than that.
Great. Elena?
Hi, everyone. My name is Elena. I'm a researcher here with AIR. I'm helping put together the CDI technique with another one of our AIR staff members. Also, I'm adjunct faculty at George Washington University, where I teach courses on data analysis as well as community characterization utilizing data. So I'm excited to be part of this project and talk to you all today.
Great. And also just want to mention, Sanjay is a member, senior member of our Center for Survey and Data Science, and is really playing a key role in putting together the data that all of you will be reviewing as part of the summits. So now I'm Jason Katz. I am the co-leads of the facilitation activities, and I come from a community psychology background. So really glad that you all could join today, and then look forward to meeting you next month. But so we have some objectives here that we would like to accomplish today. First, understanding the purpose and foundations of community data interpretation, or CDI, as we're calling it. Also, to familiarize yourself with the CDI steps. The workshop on Thursday will drill down more, but this is so that, to become familiar with the steps, being able to recognize the steps, essentially. And then third, understanding the general responsibilities of a CDI facilitator. Some of you have already decided that you want to be a facilitator. Some of you are still undecided. Some may want to serve in as an assistant to a facilitator. So that's something that we'll follow up on after the session. But just broadly understanding the general responsibilities of a facilitator. Okay. So first, what is community data interpretation, or CDI? We'll talk a little bit about it itself, and then move more into a link with the upcoming summits, including your role and an overview of the steps that are customized to the upcoming summits. So CDI, it brings together different perspectives into a unified course of action. It consists of 5 steps, starting with interpreting the data, and then prioritizing a need based on data. Third, identifying a promising practice that's linked to the needs that have been prioritized. Fourth, looking at the context, more specifically identifying driving and restraining forces. And then finally, knowledge sharing. The real purpose here is to share insights, wisdom with others, and vice versa. Real importantly, CDI, as you can see from the steps, it's not only about looking at data and evaluation, it's really making data useful, making them relevant so that you can be strategic, data informed in addressing the needs that related to opioid use and misuse in Tennessee. Okay, so just in terms of what CDI is based on, there's a whole literature on collaborative, participatory, and empowerment evaluation methods. Really, that in empowerment evaluation, for example, it's really handing off evaluation to local stakeholders, not just having professionals at a university do it, but handing it off, in a sense, putting us out of business in handing it off to folks. It demystifies evaluation. Evaluation can be a friend, to help you improve outcomes that matter to your community. So based on these methods, CDI is really, it's about building trust and deepening local stakeholder understanding of the data that's available. Also bringing community knowledge to bear in deepening how the data are interpreted, so that there really is a whole story to tell, that if someone from the outside was looking at the data, some real important perspectives might be lost. And then, this is common sense, but it's also, it's a best practice, involving local stakeholders in planning the solutions that they themselves and their families and neighbors stand to benefit from. So really, at the end of the day, in summarizing these points, CDI, the premise is that, creating and sharing knowledge from data is a social process, and it requires context and insight from those who best know the organization or community. Okay, so that was the forest view, the theory, going really far down now to the specifics, just to kind of balance that out. So the CDI will occur on the second day of your region's summit. As you know, there are going to be 3 summits that are broken down by different parts of the state. The next slide will have some more information about that. But this is going to be on the second day of the summit, of each summit, from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. And without going too much into this, because we haven't yet talked about what's specifically in the steps, the morning part will involve reviewing and interpreting the data that we'll provide, prioritizing a need based on the data, and looking at promising practices. There'll be a lunch, which will be networking and informal discussions. And then in the afternoon, the additional steps of CDI, including looking at context, creating a poster that will be a way to share what you've learned through CDI with others, and then wrapping up by 3 o'clock. So in terms of, these are the 3 summits. You can see that there's one in Nashville, April 10th and 11th, one in Knoxville on April 17th and 18th, and one in Memphis on April 24th and 25th. So really important is that they're going to be small groups. CDI is done interactively but not in a in a group that's large enough where you don't have a kind of a real inclusive process where everyone's able to speak. So we've we've thought about this really carefully. And just to provide an example, in Nashville, 270 participants have registered. Our understanding is there are going to be 6 breakout rooms. So 270 people are going to be broken into 6 large groups that are each in a room, and then within each room are smaller groups that allow for kind of more intense and collaborative discussions. And so the same type of kind of flow down to the small groups occurs in each of the other sessions. Just wanted to point that out, kind of big picture wise, that's kind of how CDI will be organized. And okay, so let's talk a little bit about your role as a facilitator. I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Elena.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for that great introduction, Jason. So let's talk about a little bit about facilitation. Now, we have collected data on everybody, but if folks could just give me a sense, if you want to type in the chat box, type in the chat box on a scale of 1 to 10, how comfortable are you with facilitating? A 1 would be, I have never done this before. And a 10 is, you might call yourself a facilitator or you facilitate on a regular basis. And only if you're comfortable, type that in the box. Great, thanks. So for facilitator, we like to do what I call little facilitation math. And that is what I call 1 + 1 is 3, which is we can do so much more together than alone. As a facilitator, you're looking to create this synergistic interaction between folks who are coming to this conference, so we all leave knowing more than when we entered. So as a facilitator, you have an important role in ensuring that participants are able to fully engage in all of the CDI tasks we've laid out, and ultimately gain insights that flow into planning and action following the summit. And today we'll just go into the general roles, and in the next workshop, we're really going to drill down into your actual specific tasks that you'll be doing. But for today's talk, we're going to go through each of the 3 categories. Next slide, Jason. So the first is encouraging. You're a little bit of a facilitation cheerleader. You're there to be upbeat and get people excited about this, as well as encourage them to recognize the value and the relevance of the data that they will be presented. It'll be a range of experience and comfort level that folks have with looking at statistics and maps. They may not do this frequently, or folks might be an expert. So we want to help them guide through the process of understanding what the value is of those the data that we will be showing them. We also want folks to be patient and trust the process. So especially when we're dealing with something so tragic as the opioid epidemic, occasionally we'll get people saying, oh, we know what the problems are. We know what's going on. Let's jump to solutions. And while we want to honor that and recognize that they're excited about moving forward to talking about the solutions, we are using the CDI process, in which the first part is taking a careful and thoughtful look at the data. So we want to just table their concerns, assure them that we will get to that, but for now, this is what we'll be doing. Also, sometimes participants might feel challenged. For instance, maybe they're looking at the visualizations and they're struggling to see the connections between them and might get a little frustrated with this. Sometimes folks can get a little embarrassed that they don't understand them too. And we just want to refocus them and keep folks positive and remind them why we're here, and to encourage them to get over those emotions and to keep moving forward. And you want to always explicitly recognize and remark on their progress and persevering on refocusing. Next slide, Jason. Next is, you will be a facilitator. It's in the name. And what we're looking is for folks to make connections between CDI and their professional and their prior professional, as well as lived experiences. I think folks in the room are often familiar with the fact that sometimes people with lived experience, which is just as valuable as professional experience, sometimes don't get to have as loud of a voice, or maybe aren't heard, or that experience isn't seen as equal. So we want to help them make those connections. We also want to facilitate opportunities for participants to explore, practice, and ask questions to better understand what we're doing in the CDI process, as well as the tasks that we're asking them to do. We'll also be doing some ongoing prompts, clarifications, and feedback to reinforce the key ideas and skills that they'll be learning. And I know a lot of us folks here love data and love this process, but we're asking you, we are not there to participate. This is not our party. This is the attendance. So we do not want to get our hands in and start pointing out potential connections or saying, oh, we see a really high death rate among young people in this county versus that one. I think that means X. No, we're there to keep folks on task, encourage them, manage the room. So we want to model, guide, and support the participants while they engage in the task. Next slide. As if those two things were not enough, facilitators also have to manage, managing the room. And we will have quite a number of folks in the room. So you'll not only be engaging directly with the table, but you'll also keep one eye on the room. Keep your ears open. Get a sense of which tables might be encountering problems, maybe voices that you're noticing are dominating the room. So you want to focus on the sense of table groups, but keep an eye on the room. One of our main goals is we want to make sure everyone at the tables has the opportunity to participate, not only participate and speak, but also people are paying attention and those voices are heard. People aren't looking away or talking over folks. Sometimes I see most people here are pretty familiar. Many people are familiar with facilitation. Sometimes you'll get the person who really wants to be the teacher at the table and take over the conversation, and we want to make sure that doesn't happen. Instead, everybody gets to speak. That also leads into helping the groups cooperate and communicate effectively with each other. The next one, which I personally find to be the hardest, which is to keep everyone on task and on time. AIR has another technique, which this was adapted from, which takes a much longer period of time. And we, at this summit, will be doing this in one day. So time is of the essence. 5 minutes, 10 minutes is very valuable. And we have to keep to the tasks that are prescribed in this very precise CDI technique. So as far as managing the room goes, that means keeping an ear on the table to see maybe folks are way too early and say the visualizations, we have 10 minutes left, we need to move them ahead. That means calling out time, saying, all right, folks, we have 20 minutes left, so make sure you're at X, Y, and Z. But you also want to be kind. People are engaged, they're excited to be there, they have great ideas. So you want to very tactfully not shut people down, but also make sure that we get everything done. Also, if you need to, then we will need to adjust and fine-tune the group tasks to meet allotments. Perhaps maybe something needs to be cut a little short. Maybe if people are really taking up more of the time with talking about challenges to a solution, and we need to get them moving over to solutions. You will, and I'll touch on this in a moment, we will all have facilitator guides, so we are quite literally on the same page. And that will have times that need allotments for each activity. It will have the critical bullet points of what needs to get done. So you'll have something to hold on to, so you don't need to keep all of this in your mind. You'll have a reference. Jason, next slide.
Thanks, Elena. Do you want to say a little bit more about tools that?
Yeah, I could walk through the slide.
Okay.
Okay. So first off, that facilitator I got just referred to, that will be your quick reference. The other pieces, and this will become much more relevant both when Jason speaks next as well as when we do our second training. Folks will have a data reflection worksheet that they will use as the state presents all of their amazing work they've done. And folks will use that to really do active listening, to pay attention and take notes to that presentation. And those notes will inform the day two. They'll also have the CDI activity worksheet, and that will guide people through the process of what they're doing on day two. We're also creating a poster template where they are going to transfer what they've done during the day to a poster template that will be then used for a knowledge sharing activity, so everyone can learn from one another at the end. Sarah and Sanjay have been working diligently with the state to put together data and visualization tools. We'll also have a promising practices packet, and that's going to be a list of evidence-based as well as emerging interventions for opioids that folks can map on to the problems that they identify and needs in their community. And Jennifer has created a beautiful opioid response planning tool, and that'll be a takeaway for participants, so that will help them organize their efforts after the summit. And Jason?
Great.
On to you.
Thanks, Elena. So just to quickly recap, we've talked about CDI itself, talked about some of the broad roles of a facilitator and tools that will be provided. We're now going to talk about the steps, still on a somewhat high level, and we'll drill down on Thursday. First, just a little bit more context on a little bit more context about the steps, how the steps will be used. First, keep in mind we're going to be split into rooms. There'll be a facilitator for each room, and as mentioned before, there'll be a further split within each room into small groups, into table groups, as we call them sometimes. And each small group will be, people will be brought together from the same county to encourage cross-collaboration, perhaps from across different agencies or systems. And then at each table, in each small group, someone will volunteer, or someone will be asked to be an activity leader. And basically the responsibilities of an activity leader are to record group input during an activity on flip chart paper, and also to help ensure that everyone at the table has a fair chance to speak. A lot of what Elena described for the facilitator will happen. The facilitator will walk around to different small tables. There'll also be an activity lead at each table. Just because the facilitator can't be in multiple places at once. So we're going to talk about the steps, starting with interpreting data, which is the first step of CDI. Okay, so Elena mentioned a number of tools that will be used. The data reflection worksheet is a worksheet that participants will have on the first day of the summit, that is the day before CDI happens. And the data reflection worksheet will have some general questions for people to keep in mind during presentations, and then to jot notes based on these questions. For example, here are 3 questions that will be on the worksheet. There may be some others as well that we're still considering. First, what data in this presentation was surprising to you? Why? Second, what data supported what you already knew, and why? And third, what data could be used to inform your work with your county or region? So these are things that you'll have notes for. Then on the second day, the filled out worksheet that each person brings is one of the sources that gets reviewed in the first step of CDI. It provides the continuity from the first day to the second day. In addition, other data sources include data and visualization tools created by Sanjay and Sarah and their team. This includes data that comes from the Tennessee Opioids Report, as well as there's existing data that we're working with, and visual aids that we're preparing. Now, just to be clear, what AIR will do is to provide user-friendly ways of looking at the data. We're not actually doing any of the everyone can make sure you're on mute. Feedback. Thank you. But the interpretation of the data comes from Tennessee stakeholders. So we're gonna set everything up for your interpretation. So that, yes. And then the activity worksheet, which is something, the CDI activity worksheet is something that will be used in each step to record what comes out of the step. So in this case, summarizing takeaways from reviewing the different data sources just mentioned. So that's the first step. In the second step of CDI, you prioritize a need based on the data that were reviewed in the first step. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with what's called a fishbone diagram. In essence, and it's okay if you're not, in essence, it's a simple diagram where you map out different factors that may be influencing opioid abuse. And we'll talk more specifically about that in Thursday's session. But to know right now is that this is an activity. It happens in the small group where you know, there's an interactive process, and the activity leader on chart paper fills out different factors that people call out. This is looking at what the first step, looking at the data that you already reviewed to inform what those factors are. And once the factors are listed on chart paper as things that may be influencing opioid abuse, misuse, other relevant outcomes, we have a structured activity in which the small group votes on the factors in the fishbone diagram that are most pressing to identify 2 or 3 of things that can be addressed moving forward. And then again, the prioritized needs are going to be recorded in a specific space for each step in the CDI activity worksheet. And then this informs the next step, which is on selecting a promising practice. I'll turn it over to Elena.
Thanks, Jason. You want to shift it over to slide, there we go. Okay, so folks have interpreted data, they've identified some needs, now they have prioritized the need, and now they're looking to identify a promising practice that will map onto that prioritized need. So they'll be handed a packet of promising practices that the AIR team has reviewed. That packet will also incorporate a chart or a little key that people can use to help them speed the process of sorting through the practices that we've identified. And these will, there will be the key, the description of the promising practice as well as its name. And folks will go through and circle practices that they think might work well. And they will record those candidate practices onto their CDI activity worksheet. Next slide, Jason. Once they have selected the intervention that they would like to focus on for the rest of the event, they will identify the driving and restraining forces of if they were to implement that intervention. So they'll brainstorm factors that may help or hinder their planned efforts, problem solve at the table the potential challenges, and return to steps 2 or 3 as needed. And they'll also have a document, yes, with the key points. They'll write those down on their CDI activity worksheet. Next slide. Finally, it's incredible how many folks are bringing across the state with so much knowledge and about this epidemic. So we do want to provide an opportunity for knowledge sharing. So folks will transfer what they've done throughout the day onto a poster sheet template where they'll fill out their key findings, their preferred solutions, those driving and restraining forces. And then as folks leave, they can linger as long as they like to read through those posters and see what other folks in the room have done. Next slide. Jason, finish this up.
Okay. Yeah. So that in a nutshell is community data interpretation and logistics around it. So, this was in a sense kind of a first tennis lesson. You're not going to necessarily be able to have a winning serve or volley yet, but this is to introduce it. And we know that many of you have questions and will need additional guidance on how to make this work. So on Thursday, we're going to have a second session, a second workshop that gets, how does one actually do community data interpretation? We'll also be recording that, really getting into what are the different techniques and tools, learning about the specific tasks of a facilitator. How do you facilitate, for example, the fishbone diagram activity? And then the following week, next week, April 4th and April 6th, we're going to hold office hours, provide an opportunity to ask questions and receive one-on-one guidance. We're not going to come necessarily to the office hours with any specific script, but really just want to hear from you all hear what's on your mind. And we're also available. I think Charlotte, Susan, Tanya, their team hopefully provided all of you with my contact information. If not, I'll also provide it afterwards so that you can contact me or call me with any questions. So I'm going. I want to open it up for questions. I think it's important to hear from you. After the activity, we'll send out a brief evaluation survey just so you can let us know how we're doing. Yeah. So any questions? And if we get a lot of questions at once, we'll coordinate that through the chat box. But let's see if people can comments, questions. Feel free to speak up.
I just wanted to make sure that when we signed up to help facilitate, we are given clarity about exactly which one of these roles, like the big room, the table, what we're doing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that's thank you. So the facilitator's role is for the overall room. Okay, so but there are other options if that's something that if there's a preference to have an assistant role, that's something that can, we could use all the help we can get because there are going to be a lot of people in this summit. But yes, so primarily when we talk about a facilitator, as we've talked about today, it is kind of on the room level, and then on the table level is an activity leader that it's more kind of a discussion leader and such. Does that help?
Yeah, I just wanted clarity about which role to prepare for, and if I need to be shifted, that's fine too.
Okay. Yep. Great. Good question. Thank you. Others?
Hi, this is Marie. I have one question. I'm sorry if I missed this. I'm still not clear on, as we talk about getting everyone through the CDI steps, who it is that is going through those steps. And so what I mean by that is we have a room, and in that room we have small groups. So are each of the small groups going through their own CDI, or are we cross-facilitating these groups to go through the process together as a room?
Good question. Yeah, so the CDI is within each small group. The facilitator will, provide, an introduction before each step, and then walk around and to each small table and provide support as needed. At the end of, in the fifth step, after going through the steps, that's where the sharing process, where people share across their small groups, and also potentially across the rooms too, depending on how feasible that is. So yeah, so the notion here is that CDI is it's not something one person alone is doing, but if it's a whole room, it's too much to really have make sure everyone's included and can and can voice their thoughts. So yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
And we'll provide more, we're going to, things that the facilitator will say before each step, and some of the other things, specific activities of the facilitator we'll talk about on Thursday. And there also will be like as Elena mentioned, a facilitator's guide that, you could look at beforehand or use as a reference during the workshop itself. Okay, good questions. Anyone else? Anything? Anyone on the AAR team want to make any comments, or Tennessee colleagues? Susan, Tanya, Charlotte, not to put anyone on the spot, but feel free to.
Not on my end, Jason. I just wanted to introduce myself. This is Sanjay Arora with the American Institutes for Research, and we look forward to meeting everybody in person and seeing you at the next training, if there are no other questions.
Okay. Well, I think that's it. So we have a little bit of, everyone has a little bit of free time in their calendar. What I'll do is send out the calendar, I'm sorry, not the calendar, send out the link to the evaluation survey. If you could just take a few moments, that would be really helpful. So thank you. Well, look forward to virtually seeing you all on Thursday, and I'll provide my contact information in the email I send so that you can reach out with any, with any questions that come up. So thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.